Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today we're talking about what can happen when you blend clinical training with intuitive readings to help clients get at the root of what's going on for them in midlife. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle with over 2 million downloads and counting. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified life coach, life leadership mentor, and certified Zentangle teacher. Today, I'm sitting down with Katie Beecher to talk about her unique blend of clinical training as a licensed professional counselor and also someone who does medical intuitive readings to help her clients really see what's going on for them. Now, I wanted to have this conversation because I see my job as a podcast host. It's to bring you interviews with fascinating, accomplished midlife women so that you can get a wider exposure to different insights and approaches. You know, as much as you can get out of the house or watch a bunch of movies and documentaries and things like that, you still don't meet the kind of people and have a chance to really hear an interview that's, somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes typically, unless it's on a podcast. So I love bringing that to you. What I really think about it as is it's like the more data and inputs you have, the more you can think about your own life. The more you can get new insights and breakthroughs and spark curiosity and find out what you want. Because life at our age can get pretty complicated. So personally, I like to welcome exposure to more views and more perspectives. So before we dive in, if you're new around here, I'd love for you to get to know me a little bit more. So if you're curious about what's been keeping you stuck and what your future self is actually craving, take my midlife quiz at www.midlifequiz.com. It only takes a couple of minutes, and it's a great way to start figuring out what's next for you. Again, it's www.midlifequiz.com. Okay, now let me tell you a bit about my guest today, Katie Beecher. Katie Beecher, MS, LPC, is a licensed professional counselor and medical and emotional intuitive with over 35 years of experience. Now, as I mentioned, she blends that clinical training of hers with intuitive readings to help clients get to the root of what's really going on in their lives physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Katie has been featured in over 200 media outlets. She has such a unique way of working with clients, creating a detailed, individualized physical, emotional, and spiritual report and symbolic painting before ever seeing them, talking with them, or seeing a photograph using only their name and age. She calls this a soul painting and then walks through both together during a session. Katie's book is called Heal From Within, an intuitive guide to wellness, and it's published by St. Martin's Press, and it uses the same practical tools and techniques Katie uses in her own medical and spiritual intuitive readings. In addition, the book teaches you to be your own medical intuitive using Katie's revolutionary step-by-step process for connecting to intuition and spirit, finding self-love and empowerment, as well as how to heal physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Heal From Within is filled with remarkable stories of healing from her years of experience, as well as her own healing from bulimia, Lyme disease, and emotional illness. At the age of 16, without telling anyone, including her parents, Katie contacted her pediatrician and began therapy for a severe eating disorder and suicidal depression. She's been healed for over 35 years. In this conversation today, Katie traces her path from a childhood spent sensing energy and guidance that she couldn't explain through a suicidal crisis at 16 that became a turning point toward healing and purpose, to decades of living with undiagnosed Lyme disease and Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. She talks candidly about disconnection from the body, why so many of us, especially women in midlife, lose touch with our own needs, and how boundary setting, even when it costs us relationships, is often the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others. This episode is an interesting one and will give you a lot to think about. And one more thing, please remember, the information shared in this podcast is intended for your convenience. entertainment, and education, and isn't geared to your personal situation. It's not a replacement for care or advice from your own medical professional. So as always, you may have some things you want to follow up on. So please seek a suitable professional to advise you on your own personal situation. And please enjoy. Hi, Katie. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Very excited.
I am so excited that you're here too, because we're going to talk about something that I really don't know anything about. And I can't wait for you to just start explaining at a very basic level, and we'll really get into your life and how it is that you help people. So let's start by you telling us a little bit about just the basics of what does it mean to be a medical intuitive?
Sure. So those of us who do this work, we all work a little bit differently. The general premise is that you tune into someone's life and body and energy field, and you help to first pinpoint what's going on, but then also address those issues. And I work pretty differently from other medical intuitives in that I'm also a licensed counselor, so I have that background. And I before meeting with people at all, with just a name and an age, I create a 4-page report, and it's very detailed. And it is root cause based, mind, body, spirit. And I write about things that have happened to them as a child, or relationships, or trauma, career, of course, physical and emotional symptoms, things like that. It's really, really broad. The goal is to address what is going on with them, whatever it is, from a root cause level, like I said. So why? When did it start? What are the physical components, emotional? Because if you don't look at someone from a holistic perspective, you really miss a good portion of their life. And I also create an intuitive soul painting out of watercolor. And it's a visual symbolic representation of, again, their energy, their bodies, what's going on. It identifies some of the same things that are in the report and also different things. And it's a fun way to get information. So I send those to people before I meet with them. I can't BS it. And during the meeting, we go over the report. People can ask any questions they want. And I get a whole mess more information from my guides. And people who contact me are anywhere from having serious health issues to, I want to learn more about my intuition, or how can I set boundaries, or, how can I deal with this family problem, or my marriage sucks and I want to get out, or, it's very, very broad. So that makes it really fun.
Okay. You said a lot just now, Katie. So right away, I need to know how you figured out that you had this ability. Tell me a little bit about what happened in your life that you're like, whoa, something's different here.
From a very young age, like 3, I knew that I was being guided, and I couldn't explain what it was. The best I had was God, which is a great thing. And I just remember things like my parents fighting and hearing this voice saying, they're really not equipped to care for you. You're more mature than they are. And knowing what people were going to say, or having an insight into things that adults would look at me like, what are you even saying? I always felt a safe presence. And when you grow up in a dysfunctional family, that's a really important thing. I recognized that I could pick up spirit energy. So at the time when I was a kid, it just felt like good and evil. So I was picking up negative things, which was really, really scary. And I pushed that away. And that was around when I was 10. I was even before that, I was really cognizant of good energy and bad energy, and who I wanted to be around and who I didn't. And it kind of all came to a head when I was 16. I'd been dealing with a really serious eating disorder, bulimia, and I was suicidal. I was done. I couldn't live that way anymore. I was throwing up 3 times a day, and it was bad. And I came home from school. I apologize for people who've heard my story before, but I came home from school and I decided that I wanted to live. And I called our pediatrician, didn't tell anybody because my parents wouldn't have been supportive. And he gave me the name of a Jungian psychologist. Carl Jung's a pretty cool dude. And he was really determined to get better. So she not only helped me with things like body image and feeling good about myself and working through the feelings and things that led me to that addiction, eating disorders or addictions, but she also was a safe place to talk about the fact that I talked to dead people and felt weird things and knew weird things, and just really, really encouraging of that, which
Was that the first time you talked to anybody about it?
pretty much. I had talked to some friends about it. I was able to talk to my grandmother about it. Little things came up, here and there, but it was the first time I really openly kind of said, this is a big part of my life and it's scary and I don't know what to do with it. And especially the negative energies and things that would come forward. So she helped me learn that I could protect myself. Like, people who think they absorb negative energy or absorb any energy, really you don't. It just feels very strong, especially if you're an empath. But we're always in control of our energy. So we should never give away our power. And I knew at that time that I was going to write my book, and I became a therapist from there. So that was kind of the beginning of everything.
So 16, that was a huge turning point.
And then as I worked with people as a therapist, I listened to God, my guides. We can get into that. But I sort of would work with people and then listen and see what came to me. And I realized that there was something greater than myself that was giving me this information. And I was always really interested in medicine. My mom was a nurse. So was getting information that people were kind of like, where is that coming from? Started to channel people's dead relatives during sessions, which was pretty weird. But the more that I did it, the more I realized I couldn't ignore this. And then kind of long story short, my mom got very sick. I became her caregiver. And when somebody has a life or death experience, you start to think like, is this all there is? What else is there? Am I doing work that's important? And got introduced to just the concept of medical intuition. And I thought, medicine and intuition. Okay, that's really up my alley. And I started to practice on people and do more. And here I am.
Bada boom, bada bing. Oh my goodness. Where in your path did you finally talk to somebody who also had this skill, this gift? Because I would imagine that would have been really important to connect with somebody else.
It was helpful. Probably 15 years ago, I found out about Mona Lisa Schultz, who's a pretty famous medical intuitive. She has a lot of books out there, and didn't know what it was, and was going through a time in my life when it was really bad. I was in a really bad place, especially taking care of my mom. And I literally said, either I'm going into some asylum where people can bring me my food and I can sit on a whatever, because I'm like losing it, or I need to do something else. And we used to live near Omega, which is a retreat center. And Mona Lisa Schultz happened to be doing a 3-day workshop.
Oh.
And I thought, okay, that sounds better. And so she introduced the concept, talked about chakras, talked about kind of, this is what this is. And you can't really teach it to people, but you can give them a lot of concepts and help them practice. So she said, I'm going to give you a name and age. And I thought, there is no way in hell that anything meaningful or intelligent is going to come out of my mouth. And I started seeing pictures of these people in my head and knowing things about them, like hair color and how they stood and what they looked like and things that were wrong with their bodies and emotional stuff and trauma. And I was just like, this is like crazy. Like, how do I didn't know where it was coming from, but the more I did it, the stronger it got. So that was really helpful to sort of get introduced to the concept by someone who took it really seriously. This is real. And this is how you can learn more about your abilities.
Wow. So it wasn't a group of people who were all like you. You just happened to be in this place where she was, and you had enough courage to connect with her and
Mhm.
open up.
Yeah, I did after that join a spiritualist church. Are you familiar with spiritualist churches?
I am not.
Okay. So I wish I had found it a long time ago, but people who are spiritualists, and this goes back to the late 1800s, they believe that we can communicate with people who have died and that they're still here. And the basic concept is treat people the way you want to be treated, which I think should be the basis of everything, right? But it was so I went to a service and they had medium readings, open medium readings during the service and energy healing. And I was like, these are my people. Where have they been all my life? And eventually I was getting up and doing medium readings for the whole congregation, if you will. So it was really nice to be around like-minded people that you could talk to about this without people looking at you like you had three heads.
Yeah, I just can't. Well, there's so many people in the world who feel different and that they don't belong and they haven't found their community yet.
Mhm.
And I guess it's a similar experience to that, but I don't know what the percentages are of people who have this gift and have this ability, but it seems like it's not that many. I don't know. Maybe I
Well,
just don't know. It's not part of my world.
I like to make what I do as non-woo-woo as possible because if you think about medical intuition, what I do is off the charts. But when you have a stomach ache, you have to immediately start thinking, where did this come from? What should I do? Should I have some crackers? Should I lay down? Should I, was it something I ate? Am I coming down with something? Do I need to go see a doctor? Whatever. And you do the same for your kids. So it's medical detective work. Even emotionally, you have these feelings. Well, why do I feel this way? When did it start? So that is a basic but really important and effective way that you are doing, medical and emotional intuition every day.
Hmm. That's interesting. And I know in your notes, what really stood out to me was this idea of being disconnected from your body, because in midlife, it's certainly a common theme. We've been so focused on putting others first, and even knowing when you're hungry or not becomes something that becomes really difficult. So, can you talk a little bit about disconnection like that?
I would love to. It's so prevalent, whether it's from trauma, from illness, from, like you said, just looking outward all of the time and at what other people need or what other people think of you. And then I think that as we get older, hopefully we start to give a crap less and realize that we can still get what we need and still care about people. But we have to take care of ourselves also. So the concept of being out of body is it's a natural defense mechanism. So having your background, it's a survival mechanism that sometimes we need. But if we are not in our bodies, we can't feel hunger. We can't feel thirst. We can't feel emotions. We can't feel intuition. We're not grounded. We cannot hear when our body starts talking to us and having symptoms. And then the more we push those down, the sicker we have to get emotionally or spiritually in order to be alerted to the fact that we need to make changes and take care of ourselves. So the other kind of fun thing about being detached is a lot of really spiritual people like me, there's a lot of comfort in not being here, in not being in our bodies,
Yeah.
because you have to feel things. And also, it's kind of fun being on the other side. So there's a place for it and it's really relaxing. And it's why things like meditation are effective or creativity, because you can go into that other side. But we have to be able to come back, and deal with the real world too.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned creativity. Creativity has been one of the main things I can do to help myself when I'm feeling dysregulated, stressed. It's a go-to. It's very reliable for me.
Yeah. I used to be, well, yeah, in my previous life, I was a sort of full-time watercolor artist and had shows in New York and did all the things. So the paintings that I do now look like a 5-year-old did them, but I love the symbolism. And I love that when I'm creating the reports, it's words. And so as a human, I've had to be careful not to interpret those words and just write what I get. But with the paintings, I don't interpret them until like the end of the session. So it's raw, it's just colors and sometimes it's a figure or an insect or an animal or a plant but everything on that page has meaning, from where the color is to how the hands are positioned or the feet or the energy or colors behind it. So everything, it's really fun, and it allows me to deliver information in a less scary way, especially things like trauma, where maybe sexual abuse shows up as a lot of red, around the abdominal type of area. And it's an easier way sometimes to bring things up, because sometimes people tell me things that they've never told anybody, or my guides reveal it in the report, So yeah, he's amazing.
That's fascinating. I love the idea of the combo also because it just makes it more accessible to people to have different ways of consuming info. That's some feedback I get about this show, is that my approach that tends to have a little bit of humor and silliness makes difficult stuff a little bit more easy to consume and to be open to listening. So I love this combination that you're doing of ways to talk to people about this stuff. Now, I also see in your notes that you had a lot of challenges to overcome when you were young, and throughout your life. You had a lot of physical stuff. Can you talk a little bit about what was going on with you, with your body, and just how you proceeded?
Yes, I learned in my mid-40s that I had Lyme disease most of my life. Growing
Oh,
right next to Lyme, Connecticut, in like the next town over, I had all kinds of physical and emotional symptoms that you would have thought somebody would have mentioned, especially since Yale New Haven was where a lot of my doctors came from. And
Lyme disease seems to be one of those mysterious things. Like I remember one of my favorite shows is Curb Your Enthusiasm, and I know even there's you probably know that episode where Larry David was very on top of Lyme disease.
and you know what? You have to be able to laugh about this stuff because it's so serious and scary,
Yeah.
you know? And yeah, nobody ever brought up even the possibility, not that mainstream testing is horribly inaccurate anyway. So, but yeah, I learned that I had Lyme. I had all sorts of co-infections. I had mold exposure, all kinds of things, and was lucky enough to find a practitioner in Connecticut who knew everything there was about Lyme and treated me without antibiotics. And then I also took a spiritual and emotional approach to it, which is super important because I didn't want to be a patient. I didn't want to identify with it. I wanted to listen, but not have it take over. I was more than just a sick person. So it was really important that I looked at it from all sorts of points of view, and I'm fully recovered, have been for a long time. And I also have something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is, on the surface, it's a hypermobility disorder. It's genetic. There's a bunch of different kinds. There's 13 different kinds, and some are really severe. I have the milder version, but Ehlers-Danlos is an inflammation of connective tissue, which again sounds really simplistic because it affects every single cell in your body, potentially. There's connective tissue everywhere. So there's emotional stuff, physical, even spiritual stuff. And if people want to learn more about it, there's a lot on my Instagram about it. And I also help people to do some preliminary identification and then help them get to the people who can do the formal identification. But it's really fascinating because so many things in my life, like even eating disorders or body dysmorphia or depression, anxiety, things like that, both of those were attributable to not only trauma, but the EDS and Lyme. So the combination of the two was looking back was like, wow, so much of my life makes sense now.
So you just grew up not feeling well, it sounds like.
I am very resilient and I always had symptoms, but I pushed through. I didn't really, I mean, don't get me wrong, there were major issues, between the bulimia and all those things. But I guess I never really wanted to live as a sick person. And so I believe that it was my spiritual strength and spiritual beliefs, as well as my ability to say there's something really wrong and I need to get help. So I always asked for help. And all of those things are really what, not just got me through, but helped me have a fairly decent quality of life. And now 33 years ago, I met my amazing husband. So, that's huge. But yeah, there was stuff there for sure.
Yeah, so it was that ability, you think, to really connect and trust yourself in these situations that you were feeling something, you were experiencing something, you needed to sort it out, and you just kept going.
Yeah. And also what I learned during therapy, there's a lot of techniques in my book about writing to your body, writing to your intuition and getting the love and nurturing and positive feedback and negative feedback, but getting that from within yourself. So the more that you get what you need from spirit, yourself, whatever you want to call it, the less important it is what other people are doing and saying and thinking. So it really helped me to set boundaries with my dysfunctional family. It helped me to get out of my first marriage. It really has helped me with everything, and it's helped me recover from things. I still do it, to this day. And that was a really important reason I wanted to write my book, so that I could pass on all the stuff that I have learned over way too many years.
Tell us a little bit more about boundary setting. That comes up so much with people pleasing and just the ability to put yourself first.
It really does. We, especially as women, are taught to care for others. We are taught,
We are.
right? We're taught not to speak up. If you see truths, you're supposed to shut up because no one wants to deal with their truth. We are taught that it's selfish to take care of ourselves. We should just be giving all the time. And if you grow up in a family where people don't have boundaries themselves, so you're not given role models, but also a lot of us have been parentified. So we've had to take care of parents or siblings. And number one, you learn that you had better push your feelings and wants and needs down, because if you don't, you're going to get rejected. You're not going to be accepted. You're going to be not loved. You're going to be all kinds of negative things. So if you push your thoughts and feelings down, you don't even know what your boundaries are, because you don't know what's important to you. You don't know what you need. But what I have seen happen over and over and over again is that people get emotionally or physically ill because their body and spirit says, this is not okay. You have to take care of you. And you have to get out of this relationship, or you have to change jobs, or you have to speak up, or all of the above. Because the only way that we can live our purpose here, and we have lots of them, is to be true to ourselves. And you can't be true to yourself if you're letting people walk all over you, or living in a hole, or doing things that everybody else wants you to do instead of what you do. So boundaries just comes into play in every area of our lives.
I guess another thing about boundaries is that when you finally say something and try to set a healthy boundary that you've probably been thinking about for a while, there's a reaction by the recipient of the boundary.
Yes, there is. It's a good way to find out who is your friend and who's not, and who really cares, and who is maybe with you for what they need instead of an actual relationship with you. So it happens a lot that when you start speaking up, you start being honest, you start saying no, right? People look at you differently. And this happened to me multiple times. And you can get labeled some pretty bad things, you know, and because people are like, well, where did you come from? And how do you have the right to have a voice or stand up for yourselves, or, and so we shouldn't let that deter us. And there's, especially if it's people that you really care about. And if they actually care about you, then even though it might be kind of strange, they might they'll hopefully will be like, you know what, I get it. And I'm glad that this person's taking care of themselves. The other thing I want to say about that is other people's pain might be the best gift you've ever given them. And by pain,
that's fascinating, Katie. You got to go deeper there for sure.
So as pain, I might mean emotional discomfort. I might mean having to do things that they're not used to doing, or having them find their boundaries, or all kinds of things. So a really great example are things like empowering addiction. And if you stop being like making excuses for the person, or being like, I'm an empath, I understand you've had a tough life, or I understand why you're in this horrible mood all the time and treat me like crap, or whatever. And you stop allowing that. And you start saying, you know what, your behavior is not okay. And there's a lot of ways to do that, right? But that person then has to either look at themselves and say, okay, this person's not taking my crap anymore, I have to treat them differently. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they have to start, going to meetings, or they have to start getting their crap together in order for you to stay. Or maybe it's things like your kids, you do too much for your kids and they have to learn how to make their own lunches, or how to find transportation. Or so other people need to learn how to problem solve and how to fix their own stuff. And we can be supportive, we can be loving, we can be there, but not setting boundaries really can border on enabling a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I want to make sure we have a little time for you to talk about your book, Heal from Within. Take it away.
So I was told by my spiritual guides when I was 16 to write this book. And it's a combination of a bunch of things. It's my backstory, how I became who I am. I talk about the Lyme and other things and how I recovered, family trauma, background, eating disorder. And then most of it is, it's divided. A lot of the chapters are divided by chakras, which are energy centers in the body. And it's not about sort of woo-y-ish adjusting the chakras. It's about looking at your body, mind, and soul in sections. So, for example, the first chakra is at the base of the spine, and there are emotional, spiritual, and physical characteristics. So that has to do with our basic needs, family, and a lot of what's going on in the whole body. It has to do with safety and security. And so that's a very quick description. But so there are, like blood and bones and body parts and all kinds of things attached to that. And if we don't feel at our basic level that we're safe and protected and that we can be ourselves, it is almost impossible to feel good in any other area of our life. So to divide the body into sections helps you and me as a medical intuitive. It kind of takes you through how I do a reading, but it takes you through all the different parts of yourselves, and you can address things like what emotional things are going on that might relate to this. Like, why was if I had trauma as a woman, my female energy wasn't respected, and maybe I had some sexual trauma or something like that. Why do I have all of these menstrual issues? Or why do I have problems with fertility? Or, why are my hips tight? Or so many different things, and it's all related. So I really take people through their entire holistic system and say, what are the issues? What are the fixes? What are different things you can do? And it's sort of like doing a medical intuitive reading on yourself, in that it's really detailed. And there's lots of tools and a lot of visual things. So I advise people to get the actual, book. A lot of people get the audio too. And then there's examples of my intuitive paintings. I teach people how to do those. And then the back is just kind of a list of different issues with some not really quick fixes, but overview of what the issue is and some ideas and some of the like holistic root causes behind them.
Wow, that is really interesting. It really is. And I can even imagine how what you're teaching in the book might even provide other ways to discuss things with traditional healthcare providers.
Definitely, because we have so little time in a doctor's office.
Right.
And they're very much geared toward band-aiding in medicine and, pharmaceuticals, I should say, and tests and all of the things. And so they really don't often bring up nutrition or what's going on in your life, or, hey, maybe you're exhausted, not because your iron is really down or your thyroid, even though those could also be causes, but also, no one asks, like, how many kids do you have, and what time do you get up in the morning, and how are you sleeping, and who has most of the responsibility around your house, and, like real actual things. So for you to be able to put all of that together and see the big picture is the most effective way to address it.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. And how can people get a hold of your book?
So the book is available wherever books are sold, Amazon and all the places, book stores and things. The easiest way probably is you can go to my website, which is katiebeecher.com. And there's a link to the book. And then there's a link to make appointments for the different varieties of readings I have, including pet readings. So.
Aw. How did you get interested in doing that?
I have always loved animals. They were always my security and my safety. I actually raised rabbits for showing when I was a kid. And it was just, animals are loving and accepting, especially when you don't love yourself. So always just liked them and always was able to be in tune with them. And when I started practicing doing these readings on people, I had a lot of requests for animals, and I'm like, okay, I'll try. And so here we go.
Oh my gosh. In grad school, my master's thesis was about the relationship between children and their pet dogs. And I have so enjoyed the ability to talk to people on this show that have some kind of a animal connection, a veterinarian. I've interviewed a couple of vets that have very different takes and very amazing experiences. And so I will put those also in the show notes here because I mentioned them as something else somebody might want to read. But I'm delighted. I saw that on your website, but you didn't bring it up just yet. And I wasn't sure how it was going to come up. So I'm so glad you mentioned that.
And the fun thing about pet readings is that the pet also tells me so much stuff about their humans. So it's sort of like a 2-for-1 reading because you learn about your pet and all of the things that you're afraid to talk about that your pet is like, hello, my owner needs help. I'm here to help them. So I'm going to spill the beans.
Well, they see everything.
They do.
I just remember my first animal that was like mine as a young adult, not all the pets that we had growing up, and we had many. But I had this persnickety cat named Hundleby for 20 years and got him just before grad school. And I just remembered the way he used to stare at me in my bedroom, like he was everywhere. One time he brought me a mouse and put it on top of back in the day, in the 80s, we were reading real newspapers. And I had like this newspaper out on my bed and I was sitting up. It was early in the morning. And he jumped up and plunked this mouse on top of the newspaper. And I screamed. I was so shocked. And then I went out and bought a book. It was a book about cat behavior. And I realized he loved me. He just didn't think I could catch my own food.
He was bringing you a present.
It was so funny. That cat was, when he passed, like 20 years, right? When he passed, I got the funniest messages from old friends. It's like, yeah, Hundleby bit me in the head. I remember. Hundleby did this, Hundleby did that. He was persnickety, but he was lovely. He was really a great cat. Anyway, Katie, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your work. I am thrilled to have your work also in my library of episodes because, as I mentioned, I hadn't really ever had the opportunity to talk to anybody who has your kind of skill and gift. So thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you around another time now that we're connected. You can't get rid of me.
I would love that. I would love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure. And I love your approach and I hope people get a lot of it.
Thank you. That's it for this episode. Thank you so much to Katie Beecher for this unique conversation. I just love the way Katie emphasized the importance for women, especially at our age, to get in touch with our own needs. This is such a common thread in coaching my clients, and it's something that can lead to regret. It's so important to understand what you want and nurture that commitment to yourself so that you can prioritize it. Thanks so much for listening to the Women in the Middle show. Please remember to share it with your friends and other midlife gals that you know would get a lot out of it too. If you are getting a lot out of this podcast personally, please consider leaving a 5-star review, which will help other midlife gals also find the show. You know, being the queen of your brain domain is the best way to be. It's time to stop living like time doesn't matter because it does. Remember, if you need coaching support for the changes you're excited to make in midlife, I am here for you and I offer group and private coaching. Head over to www.talktosusie.com. For show notes and links, go to www.susierosenstein.com and click on the podcast tab and look for episode 471. And you'll also see a link there for my other show, The Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, which is all about the reality of running your business when you're a midlife gal. It's also on iTunes, Spotify, and all the podcast places. Let's do this, ladies. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.